So we're talking about user experience today. That's what UX stands for. It's really funny when I tell a lot of people, like I tell my my in-laws, like, hey, I'm a UX designer. And they're like, what does that mean? Or I go anywhere these days, I say, oh, I'm a UX designer. They can kind of figure it out because of the designer part. At OU, my title was actually UX advisor, so that was even more vague. People had no idea what I was doing. But so user experience. So I was talking with this guy David earlier today, just a bit ago, about UX, and I was telling him, I was like, you know what? It's actually just a fancy term for strategy. So we'll figure that out here in just a bit. So who at your company needs to understand UX? This should probably be the most easiest question I pose today. Everyone. Everyone should understand UX. And so why should they understand? Because communication is key. And so at any successful business, anything that is successful or that's working, you'll always find out that they're actually communicating very well, that people are always on the same page. If you're not, there's always going to just, misunderstandings are going to happen. Someone's going to build something or make something, and it's not going to be right. Why? Because they're like, you're not doing what I asked for. So communication is always going to be key. A little slow. So what does UX mean? Does anyone want, I kind of gave an answer already, but what do you guys think that UX means? Anyone want to give a shot at it? If not, that's okay. All right. So I'm gonna give a actual definition of it. So UX, user experience, actually is a person's perceptions and responses resulting from the use and or anticipated use of something. This is going to include a person's emotions, beliefs, preferences, perceptions, physical and psychological responses, and behaviors and accomplishments that occur before, during, and after use. So use of anything. So actually user experience, we're probably talking about website design here, but UX obviously can apply to anything. So anything that you're in contact, you have experience with, how are people interacting with that, what are the perceptions of it, their prior experience with that thing. So UX is kind of like a living and growing thing, constantly going. And so it is a consequence of brand image, presentation, functionality, system performance, interactive behavior, and assistive capabilities of the interactive system, the user's internal and physical state resulting from prior experiences, attitude, skills, personality, and the context of use. So that's why I said that everyone needs to understand UX. So even like a developer, right? So a developer's making a website. If it's not coded right, if it's not dry, if they're not repeating themselves, if it's as efficient as possible, if the server deal is working right, like if it's hard to load that website, that's actually part of the user experience, right? So everyone plays a part in the user experience of something. So what is the goal of UX? Well, first, there's so much stuff, everyone can kind of create stuff. You can create a website, you can create a company, you can just create stuff. We live in an age where you can create something really fast, really easy. And so the user now is pretty picky, They are bombarded with so much advertisement, so many new products. Everyone can build a website for you. Everyone can make coffee in a bagel or produce a chair, IKEA furniture, all these things. There's so much coming at you that the user now actually gets to be really picky in what they want, right? They expect a good user experience. So the goal then for user experience is to give the users what they came for, give them what they want, when they want it, and without a headache. And so provide a seamless journey. So if you don't do those things, they're just going to move on to the next thing, right? So if you go into a coffee shop and it takes forever, and they make your coffee wrong, and they don't get your name right or whatever, that's probably bad UX. Guess what? There's a coffee shop just down the street that could You could probably go there, maybe the coffee's not as good, but the UX was so great, you might go there just for that reason. So how do you create a good user experience? So this process that I'll go over is the process that I've kind of developed over the past few years being a UX designer. Now there are going to be things, like I said, it's really just strategy, right? So there are things that may evolve in this process, may be not useful in 5, 10 years or whatever, or there may be something new that comes along that I need to put into my process. Again, what it is, it's just an actual strategy. So this isn't kind of like 10 commandments of UX or whatever. This is where I'm at right now. So the first thing that you really need to do to create a good user experience is, when you're starting to make whatever the thing it is that you're going to make. And so you do that in project discovery. So as a UX designer, what I'm always going to do first is, whatever that project is, I want to talk to the stakeholder and the owner of that thing. And I'm going to try to have an interview where I'm asking a lot of questions, and I'll keep asking why again and again and again, because I want to get to the heart of what that thing is that they're trying to make or produce. So if it is coffee, it's like, why are there so many coffee shops? Why are you going to make coffee? And like, what is it why do you have such a passion for it? Like, let me understand what it is, why you want to start a coffee shop or something like that, whatever it may be. And so, if they don't have a mission or a vision for that, then I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to work with those people and be like, you need to have a mission, you need to have values, you need to have a goal. If you don't, then we're going to design something that's not going to hit the mark of where you want to be. So project discovery is a lot about understanding what the mission, the values, and the goal is of something. After that, I should understand who the user is going to be. So who's actually going to consume whatever the thing is, right? So I need to now ask them what it is that they want or what they expect out of something. I'm going to keep using this coffee example because that's who the sponsor is. So, what makes a good coffee experience, which I actually don't know. What's funny is my wife loves coffee and I don't. And she's like, how in the world do you, we have 3 boys, like how do you get up in the middle of the night and be able to still, like today, present today, and I haven't had any coffee or I haven't had any caffeine. I don't know, I just don't like, right? Anyways, so what is I would try to understand that as a user, why do you like coffee? Why do you need coffee? What role does coffee play in your life? What happens if you don't have coffee? What happens if you have bad coffee? Whatever those things may be. And one good example of this is, I'm sure a lot of people here you have Netflix. One amazing thing that they have now, like a lot of people binge watch a bunch of shows, So if you watch a show, every single time, you kind of have to, the credits that are in the beginning, I know that we'd always try to fast forward through those. And I always even try to memorize the actual time where it was. It was it's 2 minutes and 32 seconds. If I just scroll to there, I don't have to see those opening credits because I keep watching the same show again and again. Well, they did the research, right? They know that people do that. They now have a thing where it says skip intro. So I can just press a button. They know their user, right? And so I don't know what it is. It could be with coffee or whatever, skip the line, whatever, whatever it may be. So understanding your user completely and understanding how they actually are experiencing your product or service or whatever it may be, you're able to create a better user experience that way. And you can only find that through project discovery, really understanding what that person who's trying to make that and at the other end, what their expectations are for that thing. When you put those two things together, you can really try to understand what you should be designing for. After that is user research. So user research is being able to understand the other competitors. So that's one thing, competitor research. Doing extensive, the great thing I like sometimes is if finding out how something is done, like as a designer, they sometimes say artist, whatever, great artists steal. So like someone may have already solved some problem, so someone may have already have got, how do you run a coffee shop successfully? I could probably steal like 90% of it. and what I'm maybe focused in then is just the 10% of how do I make it different from something else. So user research, understanding competitive research, but also landscape research. So again, with a coffee shop, what are other small local shops and how are they running business and what are those experiences? So I can gain knowledge from other competitors, but then also landscape research. After all that stuff, I now have a lot of information. Hopefully I have, quite a few Word documents. I can now start trying to place the information, right? So information architecture is about, before I forget, so information architecture is the art and science of organizing and labeling websites, intranets, online communities, and software to support usability and findability. The goal is to help users find information and complete tasks. To do this, we need to understand how the pieces fit together, create the larger picture, and how items relate to each other within the system. So in UX design, sometimes we get to use really cool software where before we even do a wireframe, before we even do some type of other design, we're gonna just test out the words, right? So I was using an example earlier when I was talking to David. Me and my wife, we attend Frontline Church that's just down the road. And we didn't know what the service time was, so we went to their website. I'm not talking bad about Frontline, by the way. It's a great place. But we're looking for the service time. Well, it was buried under the About section, way down at the bottom. And so that's probably not where you want to have that information, especially on a Sunday morning, when people are probably going to look for that. Now, if I was designing that, especially on a Sunday, I might have a banner up at top that tells you when the service times are. Why? Because that's what people are going there for. That's what people are looking at your website for at that time, right? So that's information architecture. How are you going to actually group the information together so you understand what the goal is and what the experience and the expectations of the user are? Having the information architecture right provides a great experience. A great example about this is Amazon, right? Now their user interface is not sexy at all, right? Their information architecture is amazing. It is on point, and so they're very successful because they have great information architecture. So again, like I was saying, we have information or software where we we give a person a task. We say, where do you expect to find this thing? And so they're literally just seeing the words, and they're able to click one word and they see like a menu and sub items under that. And we see the path that they're going, right? And so if they're going down this path and that the answer is actually way over here, well, we now know that we need to move this over there, right? So after information architecture, you try to do a design sprint. So a design sprint is simply a structured brainstorming session based on design thinking and agile development. I'm not going to go into those things because those are two whole different talks. So you run the sprint with a single team to spend 5 days designing a new product or feature of a product. So design sprint is great. Again, it's just brainstorming, right? So at where I'm at Paycom, or even at OU, we didn't just have the designer's point of view. We also had a developer's point of view, QA point of view. I can use a good example at OU, just like the advisors, the students, and the faculty. We'd always bring them into the design sprint, and we would just be sketching stuff together. And because as a designer, I don't have the arrogance to think that I can come up with the best ideas everywhere. What I'm trying to do is just being able to use a process to be able to cultivate all the ideas and to be able to make something good. And so that's the design sprint. After that, though, is visual design. And this is probably what a lot of people think UX designers do more is visual design. There are jobs out there called UI design where they simply just focus just on visual design. And visual design focuses on anticipating what the users might need to do and ensuring that the interface has elements that are easy to access, understand, and use to facilitate those actions. UI brings together concepts from interaction design, visual design, and information architecture. So if information architecture is like the beams and the foundation of a house, the visual design then is just like the paint and the color and the style, whatever it may be. And so that is a huge discipline that helps out with the user experience, right? Because understanding visual design allows a user to do something that they know how to do other places. So like here you see a green check mark. We know green, the color of green, as some type of success. And we know red to be that there's a warning or you did something wrong, stuff like that. So using visual design does help out the user experience. Another thing that can really help out user design is interaction design. And interaction design defines the structure and behavior of interactive systems. And the goal of interaction design is to create meaningful relationships between users and the products and services that they interact with. So, small micro interactions that kind of let you know, like, hey, you're on the right track. So like TurboTax is really good at this. Their interaction design kind of like moves you across to getting your taxes done, right? Or any type of process that you're trying to do on a website or something. The interaction design is very key. Why? Because it's letting the user know, like, hey, I'm actually on the right path, or hey, I have actually submitted something. Hey, I'm actually interacting with the system. And the interaction design is giving visual indication to the user, hey, something actually is going on. So, you say something like a loading icon could be probably something that we're all familiar with. That loading icon actually isn't doing anything, but it's letting you know, hey, the system actually is trying to do something, and it's about to give you the information that you need. And the last one, part of UX process currently is usability, right? So this would then be, kind of my favorite part is actually then testing what you've made, right? And I actually like to test at every single stage of the process. So how can you test at the project discovery part? I'm going to make sure that a stakeholder or owner or whatever it may be really believes in it. If they don't, then I already know that it's not going to be a good user experience. It's not going to be focused. It's not going to be separate apart from something else. It's just going to be another coffee shop, right? And then, testing all the other things out. You can easily test visual design, interaction design, the information architecture. I talked about testing that out. User research is testing it within itself. So usability then is simply asking, can someone else use this? Usability is a measurable characteristic that describes how effectively a user can interact with a product. It can also be thought of as how easy a product is to learn and how easy it is to use. So, so you can, like at Paycom or at OU, we would test just wireframes. We give them a task and we would video their face and the screen to see like, how are they feeling when they're doing something? Do they have little aha moments, and we'd be like, oh yeah, we're onto something. Then we circle that and we'd be like, this is a great user experience. We can know that we could probably apply this to other places. So there's a lot you can find out with usability and user testing. It's really going to get you to, I guess, if everything else kind of got you to 95%, usability is really going to get you to, it's really finishing the job, making sure that there really is a user experience, a good user experience. But that's a really big process, and I know I could probably talk a really lot longer time on all these things. So I really did breeze through these things really, really fast. But that's what a UX process that we use today at Paycom. I've used at other companies. And it can apply to really anything. Again, if you're running a church, you're running a coffee shop, you're making websites, you're building products, digital products, applications, the UX process does work. It's going to look very different from one company to the next because of the things that they may already have in place. And so again, communication is key because knowing how to work with each department at different companies or with different people, stakeholders, is is when you know that you're going to get a good user experience, because being able to understand is really the key. When you understand what you're trying to do and the people trying to consume whatever it is that you're doing understand, then that's going to result in a good user experience. I don't know how fast that went. 9:30. So, yeah. I guess, does anyone have any questions about it? Yeah.
Yeah, so in your role, I always think of UX as being more on a graphic designer type of side.
Right, yeah.
Is that sort of where you are, or is that, do you have UI people that are doing that?
So I started, so I kind of just fell into UX, really, because my early career was being a digital strategist and a social media analyst. And in college, I learned how to use Photoshop. And so I would make my reports really good. And I'm OCD. And so everything has to be perfect, in how I present myself or how I present a visual thing. So yes, typically you would think it as graphic design or visual stuff. But when so it's really just marrying those two things together. Now, I have another UX designer at Paycom, and she focuses mainly just on the research, user interviews, the psychological part of the interactions between a system, a product, an application, whatever. So the term is very loose right now, and it was kind of like a buzz term, since kind of 2010, like UX. So you can either come from a graphic design background, or if it's like a psychology background. Because the research, again, if I had a whiteboard, good design is like a glacier. Like all the research, all the understanding, that's going to be 90% underwater. The small 10%, the visual design is on top, and that's what you may experience. But there's so much that went into that first. So that's actually a lot more important than how it looks. Because right now out there, there's so many free resources out there. You can make anything look good. It's really easy. You can buy a UI kit, a dime a dozen, and you can just copy someone. But the actual true good design of user experience is in the research.
Accessibility come into play in your workflow?
Yes, so you do have to account for accessibility, right? So people who can't type, that's part of visual design, right? Contrast, right? If they can't, you can't have a design solely be reliant on color, right? And so that's where icons can really play a really good role, right? Because everyone sees the icon, doesn't matter the color of that icon. So understanding who your user is and understanding how they're going to interact with the thing that it is, So accessibility for coffee is we can make sure that there's a wheelchair ramp to actually be able to get in there, right? Or again, if it's an application, a software application, make sure that when you code it, that someone who's using a screen reader, that they're able to navigate. And so information architecture then plays a really big role in how someone who is not actually looking at it, but is just hearing the application, accessibility plays a really major role, and we have to account for that more and more in software application, building those things out. You had a question?
So when you find a successful pattern that you say want to imitate or copy,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're trying to differentiate it, how do you differentiate it so you don't look like, let's say you're a coffee shop, like every other coffee shop's
Right.
website? Is that pictures or?
I would have to, talk to that. I'd have to talk to coffee drinkers, and I'd have to really talk to that stakeholder, the person doing the coffee shop. So I wouldn't be able to understand like Netflix. That's something, right? That right now differentiates it from Hulu. They have that feature, right? Because they really understood their user. They understood how they actually consume the product.
So thinking back to your, kind of flowing back to the visual design component of
Yeah.
it, thinking back to your time in Norman,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the difference in recognition of positive versus negative and
Yeah.
red versus green.
Mm-hmm.
If that's a component of that organization, institution, whatever, that's their color, do you try and
Right, so OU, right? OU, their color is red, it's crimson, right? And so what we did is we looked at the color wheel, and so like for anything like success, so we didn't want to look like Christmas, right? So we didn't use green buttons. So we used blue as a good accent color to show progress and stuff like that. And we still did use red for like, hey, you're alone, or you didn't pass this class, or whatever, you're failing, whatever it may be. Yeah, danger, any type of danger. So we ended up using blue as kind of the main accent color, So yeah, so that's where visual design, understanding color theory, really helps you out in being able to design it out. So like Paycom's green, right? So maybe that's good. It's all successful, So we do have accent colors that we use there also.
So in that case, do you use more of it because it's
They do.
a positive color?
I mean, that's the current, standards. They do use a lot of green. We're trying to move away from that into using a blue, because blue right now is really good progress. So if it's a blue company like Facebook or something else, would move to something else. You don't want to have something like super saturated, right? Because you need to call out that action. So there needs to be some type of contrast.
Okay.
So the user knows like where to look, right? Yes.
So short of like a website redesign, could you talk about kind of your ongoing process of improving user design?
Yeah. So usability again. So we'll use analytics, right? We'll see what feature is being used the most, and we might have thought it wasn't so important, right? And so it was kind of buried, but people are using it so much more. We might change our information architecture and bring it more to the front. We might explore that more. So you constantly, and then we would be like, all right, let's focus on that now. Maybe we're onto something. So constantly should be evolving and understanding your users and having analytics, and that should be driving how your product, whatever it may be, where it goes. So it shouldn't just say, I know, business owner or whatever may think that they're like, oh, I really think we need to go this way, and we'll say no. Like, hey, the people are stating this is where it needs to go, and you need to follow that what they're doing, how they're using the product also. Yes.
What are the key drivers that gets the UX from an intangible concept to tangible results? Because at the end of the day, one is looking for results.
Right.
So what's a key driver?
So you're going to understand like what a good UX is, right? Like that's why in the beginning in the project discovery, you got to know what that goal is, right? Is the goal to get more people into the coffee shop? Is the goal to make better coffee? Whatever that is, like you need to be able to measure if what you're doing is working, right? And you can use analytics and all that stuff. At the end of the day, unless you're interviewing every single person, you got to just hopefully know that like, hey, the needle is moving, and we are doing these things. We are doing things that are different, and so we can start to correlate those things. And if you keep doing that, and if it keeps moving, like yeah, it is working. So it depends on what that business is and what you're doing and what the actual goal is. So you have to define those very much for you to understand what the success is. So it was the same thing when like social media was out, like first started like being a major branch of a business is like, why are we in social, right? Like, how do we know that it's being successful? How do we know it's driving business and those things? So is it the number of likes? Is it the number of people calling in because they went through a social media channel and stuff like that? You really need to define those things in the beginning.
So where does engagement live in your process here?
Engagement with who?
There you go.
I think would it also just depend on, obviously, the client, so like,
Yeah.
if it's a company that you're working for that you're doing that job for, so it depend on
So
their focus.
I'll say this. You're only going to have a good user experience because if everyone's bought into it. If people are bought into design, then it's going to work, right? Because they're going to allow you access to your users, to the people that are going to use your product or whatever it may be. If you don't have free reign to do that and to explore and to ask the questions and to work with all the departments and to get everyone on the same page, like design and UX should work with everyone, literally every department. And that's where they should have that engagement and everyone needs to be on the same page. So if they're bought in from the beginning and from the top, you should engage with literally everyone. Yeah.
So, in preparing to do a new website,
Yeah.
so would you say you would look at your analytics to see what is currently how things are currently being used on your website?
That would be part of the user research, right?
And then maybe a survey or a focus group, or
Mhm.
Our patrons are older and maybe not as technologically savvy, so I wouldn't want to just look at the analytics because they actually still call
Right.
and buy things. We want to get
Right, and so you would ask, who's your target user, and you might scale back, not use the newest interactions, stuff that they're used to, because if that's your target audience, you should, design for them so that they're actually have.
goal of growing a younger subset.
Yeah.
So
Here's the thing: is you can't design for everyone, and I think that's what's hard and where design goes wrong, and when things start being really complex and complicated, So if I design something, so like Paycom has a target market, they can't, in its HR software, you can't design the same thing for a 20-person employee company, than for a 10,000 employee company. It just doesn't work, right? Because it's so much more complex. So again, where age difference or the person who's tech savvy or not, you're gonna have to put your, foot in the sand and say, or line in the sand and say, like, this is who we are. This is who our target audience needs to be for us to be successful. And so it's just part of the strategy again.
arguably, if it is a better user experience,
Yeah, that if you're okay with people, a lot of people, my experience, and this has been at a lot of different companies, is business owners, C-level people usually are afraid of changing things because they may get bad feedback, or they may, someone may call in and be like, why did you change this? I used to click these 2 buttons. I was so used to it. Why would you do that, right? Change is always going to be difficult. And you are going to, there's always going to be difficult to learn how to do new things, Now, is that the type of user that you want? Now, if you don't want someone to move along with you, then you don't want to move, right? And that's what I would ask that business owner, like, do you want to move? Do you want to be progressive? Do you want to be at the cutting edge of stuff? If you, you're going to have to take your users with you. And some people will be kicking and screaming. And you've got to be okay with that, Yes.
This is sort of the steps that you
Mhm.
developed for yourself, how do you kind of think of it
Yes.
going forward? And you do that internally at Paycom.
Mhm.
If we're looking at doing the website redesign, and
Yeah.
we're interviewing companies to do it, should we expect similar, that they
Yes.
have this similar process?
They should have a process. And if that process doesn't make sense to you, then you'd be like, oh, it should make sense to you, right? Because If anyone explains anything to you and it doesn't make sense, then you probably won't trust that person or work with that. So design process, they're using big level words and trendy terms to try to, talk over your head. I wouldn't work with that person because they might come back later and give you something, be like, what is this,
We should expect
But-
it to follow somewhat what you.
Yes, I would think so, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes,
So
I know you want to.
when you're doing testing on your customers or your
Mhm.
audience, how do you arrive to like the size of your test pool? Like, percentage?
Right, so between 25 and 30 people, then you can understand an actual trend. And then when it comes to a level of competency, you want to be closer to like 75, 80% of people choosing one side to have a level of competency to say, yes, we can make that decision, right? Because not everyone's going to have the same preference or whatever, same taste, whatever it may be. Yeah. So you do kind of have like, and that can vary from company to company. Just that design team kind of has to make those standards. Yes.
Yeah, a nerdy question. Do you have a favorite wireframing tool that you use?
Oh yeah, I love Sketch. Yeah, so Sketch is really awesome. So a lot of people use Photoshop. I used it also, but Photoshop was made for editing photos, and so you shouldn't use that for UI design. So Sketch is really amazing. But I've used all the other ones, like Figma is really great. Adobe XD is okay. But Sketch, it was kind of really the first one. So they're just ahead, and they're open source, and so they have a lot of great plugins. And so the community is making Sketch better. So yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, Sketch is great. Yes.
On the communication side of things,
Mhm.
wireframing, explain that.
So wireframing, so as a designer, I'm just trying to get you to buy into the flow of something, right? And so I shouldn't spend all the time making this high fidelity mock-up, really nice and really pretty. I just want to put some boxes together to show you like, hey, if someone clicks this is going to happen, So it's just not having to spend all the time making something look pretty, instead a wireframe just allows everyone to be on the same page of where the flow is actually going to be. Mhm. Any other questions? Yes.
How often do you revisit something you've done? Is that based on like budget or a certain amount of time that passes?
Yeah.
Did you get that chance?
Yeah. So like at OU, we did the portal for students, so how they check their grades, how they apply for a loan, a bunch of stuff like that. We revisited that. We built it. And the developers weren't even done building it, and we already revisited and we almost started redesigning it because we got some feedback. We had feedback at a wireframe stage, but then we had feedback at a high fidelity, like at a prototyping stage and a beta stage. That as soon as you get feedback, and it was really valuable feedback, things that we missed, as soon as you see something that's significant, that is great insight that would create a better user experience, go ahead, don't be afraid of that change. You shouldn't be like, well, I'm not going to change anything for 3 years. You can't be afraid of that. So as soon as you get feedback and insight, and that's actually valuable, and it will help differentiate yourself or make you better, you should do that. You shouldn't be afraid of that.